What was your path to becoming an artist?
A very crooked one. I think I went to art school because I had absolutely no desire to become a nurse or a teacher, and there was not that enormous kind of choice in kind of careers for girls or in the 60s. And really, I only liked drawing. I liked imagination. I made a lot of drawings, telling stories to myself. I made drawings about them. And so I thought it would be fun to, draw more. But it was never a particular kind of conscious choice. At the end, I just drew so much that it became addictive, and here I am. Well, they do relate to each other because all three have drawing as their base. But they are a different, they have a different side of me comes out. And so painting, because I stand with painting, and they are very physical, absorbent. I mean, I really, I have to carry the image of the painting with me, sort of physically, in order to maintain the continuation of a canvas. While with drawing and printmaking, although it's physical, but it is a kind of secretive, it's hidden, it's about the size of my lap, so I'm sort of hovering over the image. And I think because of that, there is a kind of certain kind of nastiness and naughtiness coming out, because I'm doing something, like a child, that nobody can see. It is a secret kind of world or a forbidden world. So the mood of the images in each medium is quite different. Well, I think there's the technical kind of high reaches of, say, either the Baroque artist and preferably the Northern European for me, a Rembrandt, but also sometimes it might be a Velasquez or a Veronese, Caravaggio, of course. But then technically, I think I am mostly attracted to, say, Picasso, also Rembrandt, Dix, because they used, I think, printmaking, and especially etching, to a degree which is so much to learn from. So for me, it is a combination that I get an image which I find really, really interesting. Like on the moment, I'm fascinated by this little girl in Night Watch with the very beautifully dressed with this chicken on her belt. The oddness of it, although it is all symbolically explained why she has that chicken. And then sort of like the harshness of the medium, you can sort of make this kind of images really, really dark. So I see the girl and I'm going to make something with them. And then I maybe take something technically from a Goya to put it into a print which might work. I don't really have the end result in mind. So each proof gives me different ideas.
What does it mean to you to be a Dutch artist?
Well, I am actually really, really pleased, that I'm Dutch, because I think that I'm just very, very good artist, And, but no, aside that, there's a kind of darkness. There's also kind of a crude sense of humor about Dutch artists in their work, in their imagery, in their narrative. And there's a melancholy, there's flatlands. So it has a lot of aspects which appeal to my character, I guess. And of course, even more so because I'm a foreigner. I might not have been so Dutch if I had stayed in the Netherlands. But because I've lived most of my life in other countries, and the longest in England, or in the United Kingdom, well, really in London, I think, it has become more pronounced, my, say, original conditioning.
What does it mean to you to be a female artist?
Well, at last, I can say the things I never have the courage to say otherwise in life. In daily life, I'm not half as confrontational as in my work. People might hit me back or something. So, no, I don't really, and I don't like fights, but a lot of things which really bug me, both as a woman and as a person. Also a lot of sexual things, you know, the kind of things you are slightly ashamed about that you have, the jealousies, the kind of grossness about sexuality. They can all come out in your drawings, and that's totally fine. I think, you know, you can make them into something both acceptable to you and that we are all like that to some extent or other. So I think it's a really freeing kind of form of communication to make images about things which are prohibited to talk about or to even acknowledge to yourself.
When I hear and read what a lot of people see, feel and hear and respond to in your art, I feel that they're getting a sense of liberation from you exploring things that otherwise often remain unexplored. Can you say a little bit about that?
I think that's wonderful. Because I get sort of not maybe liberated, but I do get insight into in some parts of myself I don't know before I draw them, if you know what I mean. I work quite intuitively, so I don't really know what kind of images I have inside myself till they have come out, and so sometimes I can be myself quite shocked. It's just a little bit from, oh my God. And if sort of like then people feel liberated by the, that they see that somebody else has the same kind of or similar kind of dark or wild kind of imagination, I think that's wonderful, because that's all we need. It's like with a good friend who, you know, you sort of confess to a good friend some really kind of horrible, shameful thoughts, and the friend says, yeah, fine, I've got those too.
Carrying on from that, the idea of the artwork as the confessional.
Well, it's a bit more than that, of course, and because, you know, there's also... I like also that the artwork has a side of being enfant terrible. So that in civilized society, with the decorum and the certain rules of conversation, the artwork has also a function of being a pièce de résistance, so that people can talk about it. They can, because it is there, they actually then become freer in their own, in their conversation, and maybe it will lead also to other associations in the way they look at the world.
People, governments talk about the civilizing effect of art, whereas I think you go somewhere else and you're interested in the lack of civility. What happens when things break down?
Well, there's two kinds of things. I think, you know, a civil society and a lawful society, I think, is really, really important. And I think in daily behavior that we should have kindness before anything else instead of like violence. But because we all have the other side, we have the violence, we have the jealousy, we have hate or uneasiness about being nothing, that if it doesn't get outed in any kind of way, either in images or in language or in any kind of thing, then of course it will blind us to the fact that we have to suppress it, we have to keep it at bay. So all I do is to sort of like acknowledge it is there, so we don't have to sort of like, I don't have to go and kick a dog or slap a stranger, because, you know, I have already, it has been outed, it has been acknowledged, and I think the acknowledgement is all what it should be about, not to act it out. Well, I suppose, like most people, I have not a little, but we have sadomasochistic sides, in that sort of like the borderline between pain and pleasure are tricky. They're not sort of like clean cut right in the middle of, oh, here is pain and that's where pleasure starts. And I'm just intrigued by things which are not totally clear, they're not rationally defined, but yet, of course, intuitively, you have to sort of say, okay, well, this is where on this moment I say, no, I'm not going any further. So the negotiation between the extremes and the negotiation also of the middle path is something which in drawings and images you can put in with quite a lot of humor. because, humor, of course, is very, very important for things you cannot control or totally understand. You can put a bit of like the slapstick side of humor in it. For instance, if I sort of put a person being bound on a spiky bed, I might give them a pair of knee pads,
The way you address sexuality in your work is bold, and we're used to seeing depictions by male artists, for the most part. What more can you tell me about that?
Well, I grew up sort of in between two worlds, sort of like that in the 60s, although it was liberated by having the pill and you could have sex, as much as you liked without the responsibility or the fear of becoming pregnant. Of course, it was still a very sexist kind of world. And I'm not saying that the men were the baddies. We were equally, believing. I did, I really wanted to have the position of the man. I didn't want to be a man. But, men, well, they still have a better position socially than women. So, and in order, I guess, to get my own back, I make images about, say, a particular kind of boldness, which maybe I don't have 100%, but for which I'm aiming. And it doesn't have to be specifically in sexuality, but of course sexuality is a tricky kind of subject matter, because there is a certain question of a power struggle in sexuality. There definitely is. The giving and taking aspect of it. And so I do a lot of negotiating through my images in that, because it's not something which is resolved, and not also something which will be resolved in the next, few generations. This is like a very slow process, and we need to, both men and women have to work towards that.
The characters in your artworks, where do they come from?
Well, they just, I might have sort of a nebulous feeling, and in a way like characters in a book, or maybe like actors on the stage. I will dress them. I will give them certain hairstyles or certain shoes. There's a little bit of fetishism coming in, because I like, for instance, men with high heels, for instance, and hairy legs. Well, maybe in real life it isn't really that necessary, but I like drawing that kind of thing. I like sort of people being tied with bulging flesh. Now, again, this is not particularly a real life desire, but they sort of like they work like props, like a shorthand to sort of indicate the kind of person, or they have very elaborate hairstyles or something. So the characters are made up to suit the feel about the issue I want to make.
How about your use of characters from stories from other artists, from other paintings, from the Bible?
Well, yes, but the characters are mine, although the story is from the Bible, or mostly Old Testament actually, because I quite like with Old Testament stories, being that I grew up in a Christian society, not a particular practicing Christian, but I know the stories, of course, as part of our collective heritage. And I find the stories because they don't really have an ending, they're not really concluded, they're often quite violent, they're often quite asocial, because the laws of the Old Testament gods were a totally different law than our present day law. And they are quite intriguing, and they reflect, I think, on a lot of things which you do in your own life. For instance, like Lot's wife, who turns into pillar of salt. That story came back to me basically when I myself sort of tried to redo an old love affair, which had long finished, and then sort of thought, okay, well, we fancy each other again. Let's do it now by better than we did. Of course, we did it exactly the same, actually even worse. And I was very moved by this looking back to trying to redo some mistakes you have made in your life. You cannot, but the urge to do so is very, very strong, and it's tragic a little bit. And I quite like that kind of empathy for our futility.
Can you talk a little about the evolution of your printmaking and your use of different printmaking techniques?
I just look at other people. I'm mostly really, I'm quite basic, that I really like the great masters. Dix, Picasso, Goya and Rembrandt. I think that is enough for me to give me ideas till the end of my days and then some more, you know. So I'd like to become, I'd say, just more subtle each time, you know, that they are really getting more and more complicated and they look simpler, you know, my work. And I'm really excited about sort of like challenges to make something really work. Looks like he did it in 5 minutes and it is not. And so that is really important.